Essentially, it's like once you play through your first game, your deck of ether fields is your deck of ether fields. Nobody else has one like it.
I don't want to give away too much, but it's like that character coming together has definitely had an influence on how we've been thinking about like Too Many Bones too. Like
we were like finally getting our offices done, and he like takes me into where the dev office was going to be, and he just goes, "This is where you'll be moving." He's like, "I feel like you need to switch full time."
I think with Elder Scrolls, we made a very different product that kind of also learned some of the lessons of Too Many Bones.
You're getting rid of cards for good. You're making really tough decisions. Solves a deck building problem.
It's like, I absolutely think a good dice roll should save you from losing a losing situation, but a bad dice roll should never cause you to lose a winning one.
Welcome to Ryan and Salem. I really appreciate you being here. Hot off the press, my Trover is about to hit. I just got the out for delivery.
Oh, great.
I'm pretty excited about that one. Did either of you have any hand in Trover?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So Trover, I'm Salem might be frozen here again, but but Trover is honestly, it came from like a discussion that I was having with Josh Carlson and Josh Walgus like a couple of years ago. We were kind of talking about how we couldn't really produce any more Too Many Bones stuff because the Trove chest was full. And then I was kind of like, well, like it's not like totally full. Like there's like a few slots left in Riffle's Gearlock container. And then I was sort of like, oh, that's not kind of a funny idea. Like, what if we just made a Gearlock that was like, the joke of it for April Fools is that like you thought we were like going back on a promise, like you thought we were betraying the trust of all the people who had the Trove chest, but actually what we're doing is we found another place that you could put it in the Trove chest, and then like the more kind of elaborate and the more complete of a character that would be, we found it was like that the funnier that the idea kind of became to us. So I sat down last year with Andrew Santoro, who works in our marketing department, but also has been helping with like a lot of design and development stuff for us. And the two of us kind of like sketched out the idea for how Trover would work, and we kind of designed the mechanics and the dice together. And then what we didn't originally think it was going to be a kobold, but then Salem was kind of like, oh, that'd be kind of funny if it was sort of a kobold type character that was like almost kind of had a box troll vibe. And so then like the kind of the character's personality started coming together that way. And yeah, I think we're really happy with how it turned out. I think it's a really fun and funny character, and honestly, I think it's even maybe, I don't want to give away too much, but it's like that character coming together has definitely had an influence on how we've been thinking about like Too Many Bones too. Like we're making another game in the Too Many Bones universe, and I think Trover has actually had an effect on like how we've thought about how to make characters for that game as well, which is kind of fun.
Oh, Too Many Bones too. Oh, okay. I'm gonna try not to go off on that. This is about 20 strong. That makes me incredibly excited. Yeah, but Trover, I'm excited. I love the weird. I love the quirky. I'm a big Elder Scrolls fan. What you did is incredible. My review says it all, and all of the content I put out. But there's something just, I don't know, the whimsy of Too Many Bones, the characters that you all created, to me just feel so fun. Like I love the personality that comes through on all of the different skills, and the weirder the better for me. And I think a lot of people really praise Elder Scrolls for being able to build whatever you want. I really loved the idea of just having this super unique character kind of given to me and letting me, play with those levers. So hearing that you are, I haven't been keeping up on things. I've been doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I had no idea. I knew it was a rumor, but I don't know that it's been said out loud that Too Many Bones 2 was being worked on or is something that's being greenlit.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a lot of details about it yet publicly, partially just because like we're figuring it out still. Like we're still kind of in we're still in some kind of conceptual stages. We're getting more and more as it goes, but yeah, I mean, like definitely something we've been thinking about for a long time and starting to work on, kind of in between getting the Awakened Realms decks finished and proofing like the second round of Elder Scrolls stuff. that's we've also been kind of working on that. Salem's especially has been very productive on that front, coming up with a lot of character ideas and things of that nature.
Are you by any chance taking into account cooldown?
That's something we're thinking about. We're thinking about, like, I think it's like we don't want this to be a sequel. We want it to like, we don't want it to just be like, oh, this is like Elder Scrolls again, but now it's in Too Many Bones or anything like that. But I think with Elder Scrolls, we made a very different product that kind of also learned some of the lessons of Too Many Bones in terms of like some of those elements that felt a little bit more frictiony, sort of like, for example, like how it was sometimes was annoying to use skill dice in Too Many Bones because you only got to use them once, and then like, so maybe that kind of led people to want to get stats more often, you know, and so that was something we kind of addressed a little bit in that. But then same thing with this, where it's sort of like we want to go back and like look at like maybe here's some things we learned from Elder Scrolls and from Bones, and then make a new thing, but sort of kind of try to spiritually take these things that are like, what is fun about these things? What's maybe a little bit less fun to some people? How can we evolve that stuff, and make a totally new thing? But still, you can see like the DNA there. So yeah, it's still a lot of it. Like I said, I couldn't really talk about it even if I was allowed, because we're still sort of in the like, so characters, like, how should they work? Should they work like this? Like, what about like environments or map or that kind of a thing, you know? So it's we're having more and more discussions about it every week, but I would say there's very few decisions that have been made about it like in a concrete way, I guess. Other than to say that like the bespoke, we definitely, what you were saying about the bespoke characters, like that will be much more of a thing in this than it was in Elder Scrolls, where like they'll work differently than they work in Too Many Bones 1, but there will be like, you'll pick a character and that character will have a name and it'll have like certain things that only that character can do, and you'll play that character, you know.
Yeah, I personally just love that, and that was what originally kind of got me into, you know, even knowing that chip theory existed, and I was just so enthralled by being able to, you know, explore these different characters that you all have created. And for me, the stat padding, I know a lot of people, you know, that's a big criticism. I never really worked that way. I would obviously, to me, training the stats was so boring. I hated training stats. I wanted to train the skills, and I wanted to use those skills. Now, being able to put them on cooldown would have been incredible. First and foremost, it's all right, Salem. We're gonna patch you in.
Hey, we back?
Yeah.
Being able to put those skills on cooldown would be huge, but also an expanded map similar to you know, the dungeons and such and setups that are in Elder Scrolls. Like, that would be my dream game. So I don't know if that's, you know, that's the other thing that always bothered me a little bit in Too Many Bones was the constraint on the small grid, right? And I felt like a lot of times, well, first of all, moving around wasn't that fun. More fun is just standing there and punching somebody. And I felt like I did that more often than not. As much as I probably should have moved around, I didn't always feel like, and depending on the situation, that there was incentive enough for me. But then when Elder Scrolls came along and you were looking at this map, and especially in the dungeons, that's just like the best part. And you're trying to puzzle out this situation and how you're going to get around everything. That was just so fun. And I just couldn't stop, you know. Elder Scrolls as an IP is fine. I'm more of a Fallout guy. But if I were to put the Too Many Bones IP on there and some of that whimsy that comes with those characters, the bespoke nature, that's just like my dream. So can I be an unpaid intern? I don't have a job now. Can I stay at anyone's house? I'll come on over and we'll just you know, play Bones 2.0. Like I would love to. You know, I have a few months on my hand, so if anyone needs it.
Well, if you come up to Minnesota to like check out some game stores up here, you can definitely swing by the office. I mean, you know, I don't know exactly how we're going to be doing the external playtesting on this, because like it would have been really difficult for us to do like a ton of TTS. We did some, I guess, the first time for Elder Scrolls, but it's like it was way easier to do it this time because like someone went and made like a big mod, and it's easier to make a big mod of a game that already exists.
Right.
So we'll see. But like I certainly, you know, if you want to play test something, if you have something to play test,
no, I don't think you heard me. I'll go and live in the office.
Yeah.
And I'll just you guys just show up I'll just wake up, I'll roll over, and we'll just start playing Bones. Like that
Yeah.
would be my dream. My wife and kids would think I'm even crazier than I am right now, not actually applying for jobs, but you know, yeah, it's a midlife crisis. I got to do something nuts.
I do have to compliment you though, because I agree with you. I hate training stats, and I think that's true of most people in our office. And that was one thing I said when we were kind of doing the Trover stream last week, was like I really had to be reminded during us testing this thing that it's just like that is the instinct for like a lot of people who like min max bones. It's just like stats, and so like we really want, well, all the characters, but especially for Trover because he's got so many skill dice, like we wanted the skill dice to shine, you know. And so like I appreciate you saying that, because it's like, yeah, to me it's always like, what's like the weird fun unique stuff I can do? I'd rather do that than bump my stats up. And honestly, that's something we're considering in the new game as well. Just like is there like a little bit more of like a ceiling you could put on stats, and if so, how that is, and how do we, again, how are we encouraging people to want to train in skills?
An automated progression system, maybe, like just that.
Yeah.
That's the unfun part to me. Just like, you know, make that. You know, create milestones, have me, you know, try to go hit these milestones to become kind of generally more powerful. But I just want the cool dice. Like that's all I want. I want to do the cool stuff. You know, I want to have these crazy moments on the map where I, you know, roll this insane combo and it just pulls off magic, as opposed to it just being a, you know, a stat dump against an enemy.
You know, it's funny though too, because like when we did the second round of Elder Scrolls stuff, and sorry Sam, I'm talking too much, but like
oh, by the way, this is what we do on this show. We just ramble, so sorry if you have anything to do.
No, it's all good.
I mean, Ryan's taking the rambling from me, so
well, we're gonna get to you, Salem.
Well, you know, on the second round of like Elder Scrolls stuff, we were like, oh well, no one's using combat anymore, like, which is funny because like the combat is like sort of the equivalent of like training stats in Bones, and we were like, well, how do we make combat dice interesting? Because that became a thing. People were like, well, I don't want to train my combat stats ever, and so then some of the skills now, like or classes like are like kind of involving combat dice now in different ways. So I think what you want when you make a game, it's like the whole game is your precious baby, and so you're like, well, someone isn't looking at everyone is like concerned about my baby's like adorable toes. They're not thinking about like my baby's like, you know, perfect smile. So how do I, when I make an expansion to it, how do I make it so that they're really looking at the baby's teeth because they weren't doing it before, you know?
Yeah, that's, and in the games you make, the number of interactive pieces that have to come together to create your baby is insane, and trying to make everything interesting and work incredibly well together. Like, my hat's off to your team over there at Chip Theory. It's really awesome. I think your company does things the right way, and that's actually one of the reasons I started, which I think might have been Salem, one of your first roles, which was interacting with a support specialist. Salem, did you start? So it wasn't with you in particular, but I had, you know, issues. I had a missing, my very first Too Many Bones went missing on Christmas, and they sent me, you know, it's funny, they actually, my wife got it, and I was so excited, like literally like a kid on Christmas. I'd never been so excited for a present, and I knew it was coming, of course, because it's the only thing I asked for my wife. And I got sent like random pieces, non-Chip Theory pieces of just like stuff, whatever warehouse it was coming from. They sent us something totally different, and I open it up and I go, is this a joke or something? And my wife's like, that's not it. I was like, you didn't look at it before you, like, I had a little bit of an out of body. But and you, of course, you have a question there, Salem?
Yeah, what year was this? This sounds familiar, actually.
21, I think.
I think I remember this, actually. Like,
yeah, it was
again,
a little bit of an ordeal, and I probably annoyed people.
Because I think, as you mentioned, I don't necessarily think I worked with you directly, but this whole ordeal is extremely familiar to me. I think you've like re-unlocked a memory.
Right.
I'm trying to think. Oh my gosh, you were still working. You were still working support until, right? Because
Yeah, I would probably say like a 40-60 split, dev and then support. So still more support than dev, but I was definitely
Name some of
making
the
that
other support
transition.
specialists at that time.
So Heather or
Heather.
Raven.
It was
Yep, that
Heather.
makes sense. Yep.
Yep. It was Heather. Is
Yep.
Heather Love I think it was Bulbasaur?
Yes.
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 Okay, yeah, yeah. We went back and forth. So this interaction was just so great, and I know I was annoying her. I was just so passionate. I didn't have a YouTube channel or anything. I was totally new, and I just wanted this game so badly, and it was like out of stock, and I was just so disappointed. I had to wait like another month. But the interaction that I had with your company early on was so incredible and caring, and not at all like, you know, a lot of board game companies just like don't have, I guess, the customer service chops. But that first interaction was like, you know, this, I don't know, a really big foundational thing that I really appreciated, that made me come back. And I had a couple other things. I had a trove chest that got busted, and we all know how those ship. But all of those interactions have been so insanely great. Is that like a any sort of kind of belief that you all have as a company in terms of like looking at your customers in a specific way?
Oh yeah. I mean, with like having started in customer support, I can absolutely vouch for like pretty much the moment I started working here, there was so much of a degree of like, hey, you know, if you can think of a nice way we can like help someone more, like essentially go beyond what would be normally expected, like do it. You know, obviously within reason, you know. Um, but I remember too, like when I first started, and they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, be incredibly like when it comes to like component replacements." Like obviously, you know, there's a difference between like what is something that we can actually reasonably replace. What do we consider to actually be damage or something? But I remember too, like it's like yeah, have some leeway, have some grace. You know, like someone had one of my first ones was a duster character mat that their cat had scratched up. And so it's like, okay, we didn't do anything wrong. Our manufacturers didn't do anything wrong. Nothing went wrong in shipping. We've done everything right on our end up until this point. But it's like, yeah, we'll send you a replacement, no problem. You know, and obviously we can't do that in all circumstances, especially like depending on what it is and where we might need to ship it to, especially as shipping costs rise.
Yeah.
But there's always been that degree of like, no, we genuinely want to make sure people are like, because anytime you have to interact with customer support, you're probably not happy to do it, you know,
No.
because means
You're
something
not
went
typically
wrong.
calling to praise everyone.
Right. And so we've always just been like, okay, we want to make sure that at every point in the experience of purchasing and playing a game, that people can go like, yeah, no, I like interacting with chip theory, whether that's being a part of a campaign, you know, buying and playing the games, if asking questions in our Discord about rules clarifications and having, you know, Shannon be there or any of the other Discord members who have sort of really taken up that mantle as like almost like unofficial community ambassadors for certain games. Uh, and then customer support, you know, and always making sure like, hey, you know, even when it's like a situation where it sucks and we might not be able to do something to actually help remedy the situation completely, like we always want to make sure what can we offer, what can we do to soften the blow. Um, yeah, and I really appreciated that because I've worked customer service in other places, and oftentimes it has just been like, do the minimum, do
Right. Protect the
like whatever
company's
saves us money.
interests.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas like I mean, I don't think I have ever like people came up to me at conventions and they would recognize me or not like, you know, they'd see my name and then recognize the name and go like, "Oh my gosh, you helped me out with like these things." Like I was in Essen and I helped this one guy in Germany. This was also one of my first things. I think I replaced he had such a like bad luck with his too many bones dice. And I had to like replace a good number of them. And because there was so many, I ended up getting a couple wrong. And he's like, I'm so sorry, but there's like 4 of these dice that I didn't actually need replacing, and I still have issues with the other 4. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I'll get down to that. And and this is of course shipping to Germany from our warehouse in Minnesota, so it's like it takes a while to get there. It's doing all these things, So this is like a over the process of like a couple months, and he was just like, hey, like, thank you so much. This was incredible. There was so much work put into making this right. And, and he was like, and you're always so patient. You're always so understanding. Like, thank you. And then he's like, I'm going to buy you a beer sometime. And then I went to Essen like later that year, and he's like, hey, I'm like, I promised you a beer, and I'm like,
Yeah, that was a German
I've never
beer,
had
too.
that. Right. Yeah. I've never had that kind of interaction before working in customer service until I was doing it for Chip Theory. Like it feels good actually. Like,
Oh yeah.
When of course it makes the moments when you can't actually like help feel way worse. Cause you're like, oh no, I really want to do more, but the feasibility of whatever situation it might be.
Yeah, so I appreciated it so much because I've worked for Nordstrom for 2 decades until very recently, and I started on the floor. Customer service was king. There's like this lore in the company around somebody returning a tire to one of our stores. Which is real. It was in Alaska in our Anchorage store. It used to be a tire store, and an old lady brought in a tire for whatever reason, and the store manager took it back. And it wasn't, and that story demonstrates one thing, right? It's not about like doing, I don't know, what's fair necessarily. It's about like, how do I build raving fans for life?
Right.
And maybe you all take this story back because you were so patient with me, and over multiple situations, I bought everything in Too Many Bones. I don't even know how much. My wife might be listening to this. It's probably only $100 or so, honey. The Trove chest. I bought absolutely everything. I bought Burn Cycle. I just kept going and going and going, all because of those interactions. So those are, and I started a channel, and the very first thing I was doing was unboxing Too Many Bones and then playing it. And, for the first few months, that's all I made videos on. So, maybe, doing what would make the customer happy does actually end up, making more money from a corporation's perspective. Oh no, we lost Salem again.
Yeah, we can ping pong back this way.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Salem, you're back.
Oh, there they are.
Ah,
there they are.
Oh my gosh,
Right.
I have absolutely no idea.
We can cut that out. It's all good. So one of the questions that I had is basically around both of your starts. And Salem, we just talked about, like, you were a support specialist first off. How on earth did you make it here where you're designing board games? Presumably you had no experience in the designing of board games before coming to Chip Theory?
I mean, yeah, that's true. I had experience playing board games.
Which is different, right? Just because
right,
we
right.
play them doesn't mean we can design them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Honestly, it kind of started within like the first couple months of me even being there. So, because I started in January of 2019, and Cloud Spire was in development, and I hadn't been given a ton of responsibilities yet from the support angle. So I had some time, and I think I wasn't even asked specifically. I think there was just a company-wide ask being like, hey, if anyone's free to learn Cloud Spire and then maybe do some playtesting for it. And I'm like, yeah, sign me up. Absolutely. I'll do it. And I dove in specifically into the solo. And there is essentially, I just really absolutely resonated with it. And I got really good at it. And then more specifically, I got really good at breaking it. And so there was this, yeah, I know, right? So there's this ongoing joke that I had with Josh Welgus, because he was doing a lot of the solo scenario designs, and I would play through and just break a scenario, and I would give him like pages of notes, just like multiple pages. We would joke about like it being a novel, and I'd be like, hey, here you go, here's everything. And I kept doing that, and they were all good notes. Like, I didn't want to just be unnecessarily wordy. I want to make sure it's all very good, specific feedback. And by the end of that project, he was even just like, look, I trust you. If you find an issue and you break something and you think you can fix it, go for it. I do then have to apologize, though, to all of the Cloud Spire solo players who have gotten their butts crushed with that first solo scenario, because, I mean, we kind of tailored the difficulty of those around
You being
me,
so good.
which it was like, oh, all right, I don't know if that was the best idea in hindsight, but then also too, at the same time, the solo community for Cloud Spire has just, they love it. They just love how hard it is and how rewarding it is to overcome. And now that first scenario too has become like a rite of passage, where it's like, no, you have to get your, I apologize for my language, but this is the only way I can like think
It's
of it.
okay.
It's like, you have to get your ass kicked by Ignition.
Yeah, we can say ass,
like
don't
that's
worry.
just all right, perfect. It's like that's just how it gets. Like that's a Cloud Spire experience. Is you learn the game, you play the first scenario, and you get wiped. And I'm kind of proud of that. Like, I was a little nervous at first when people started saying how hard the game was, but then people started to get it too.
That reminds me of
And
the
pretty
first
much
fight in Elden Ring. Have either of you played Elden
Oh
Ring?
yeah, yes, against
Where you just-
like the first big boss.
Yeah, you just get your ass. Well, no, literally
Yeah.
like the very first scene is you're walking through, you have like nothing, and you just get smashed.
Yes,
Some
yeah,
people
and you
can
like
actually
can't
beat
even
it.
beat that guy.
Yeah,
I know.
some
I
people
never could.
actually beat it, which I think is absolutely nuts. Like you can do like 1% damage per hit, or even less.
Right.
But yeah,
right.
that's what
Yeah,
that's what that reminds me of. Just like,
I love that comparison. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And then pretty much ever since then, it was just, I like to call it weaseling. Just sort of continued to maybe overstep my bounds a little bit here and there. Just because like then I got invited to help compile playtesting notes, offer input on those, doing that. When we did the Cloud Spire reprint, I got asked to design the tutorial scenario for solo, and continue playtesting for the other new factions. And then probably the biggest like tipping point, I would say, was with Too Many Bones Unbreakable. And it's great that Ryan's on this call here because he can actually speak to that, because it came down to Polaris specifically. So Polaris was one that Ryan designed, and it was in playtesting.
My favorite.
I know. I remember your video of it. I was so excited.
My favorite.
Yes. And like the playtesting was coming back, and people were just not quite getting her. I guess. And I'm not going to blame the players. There's always a degree in which it's like, okay, how do we let the fun be the thing that drives players to where to go, instead of like forcing players to find it. And so, as I was compiling notes, I just had these ideas, and I'm like, all right, this is absolutely not what people asked of me. This is barely even what people would probably tolerate of me doing. But I did a pass through of like, hey, based on the notes, based on what I understand of this character and what we hope to still keep of this character, here's my redesign. And I talked with JC about it, and he was very he was very interested. He's like, yeah, no, I get this. And so then he's like, we'll have a call. And so it was the three of us, so Ryan as well. And I think that call too helped make even what I had better, because Ryan had some objections with certain things, which I think was for the best, to like keep some of the original identity a bit more. But through that conversation, we really dialed in on to where Polaris is today. And yeah, I mean, to hear that she's your favorite, like, that's awesome. That's wonderful. Like, I've seen a lot of Polaris fans out there that are just, they love how she operates. And I think that was the moment where too, like, my foot was not just in the door, I was actually passing through. Because then shortly after, my boss at the time, who's our chief operations officer, Andrew Chesney, we were like finally getting our offices done, and he like takes me into where the dev office was going to be, and he just goes, "This is where you'll be moving. He's like, I
Oh,
feel like you
cool.
need to switch full time. And he gave me one final thing. He's like, I just want to make sure, like, is that what you want? He's like, I don't want to kick you out of support because I'll miss you, but
Oh,
Salem's-
and that's where I've been ever since.
that's awesome. There's so much I could go into, and we've already gone so long. So I'm gonna try to hold myself back a little bit because I'm so interested in that story. But Ryan, you started as writing lore. Is that true?
yeah. Well, so I started freelancing here in, I want to say 20, I think like late 2017. It was like a few months before like Undertow uh, was on Kickstarter. I think to me was Undertow, and um, that was it was a very small company at that time. Basically, they had like, I think, 4 full-time employees, including the owner. And I'm not even sure if Anthony, our artist, was full-time at that time, but including the owners, I mean. But yeah, so they were just like, we need somebody who like knows how to do writing and editing to actually to edit like the copy that we have on the second print of Bones and on Undertow. Uh, and I knew Josh Welgus from, we both went to college at the same time, and I used to work at a newspaper, and so they knew I was like, I could do editing and stuff. And then I kind of was like, oh, like I like doing this, and I was like, I think I could really kind of help continue to kind of push the writing of these games a little bit further. And so I kind of sold myself as doing a lot of their flavor writing from original Cloud Spire on. So then I wrote like the hardcovers for Cloud Spire, and then they ended up, I was kind of doing more and more stuff, and then they ended up hiring me full time like a month before the pandemic hit, actually. So I feel pretty lucky that was able to work out. But and then yeah, I did kind of some social stuff and some writing for a while, just mostly just writing, and then I want to say, yeah, also around around Unbreakable. I helped a little bit with some of the development on the on the second Cloud Spire campaign. Like Josh designed the like the Horizon's Wrath uh, faction, but I had kind of had said, oh, what if we did this? What if we had this faction that was like pirates that you could move their ship around the board and stuff, and then I helped make some of those to help like do the maps and stuff for like the solo scenarios in that one. And then I think it was also around Unbreakable, like pretty early in the Unbreakable process, that I was asked to start doing design stuff. And then that was kind of when our design and development department was kind of crystallizing outside of mostly just Josh Carlson. And so Josh is still our head designer, but we had the kind of this formal department, so I ended up being the director of that department. So that's the kind of a short version. So I still do most of the flavor writing, and then Salem has contributed a lot of that as well on the Elder Scrolls titles in particular. But and then I still am kind of like the lead editor. We have Liz McFarlane Johnson, who's not on this call. She or Johnson McFarlane. She also does a lot of the editing as well. But yeah, so I still do some of the old hats, but then I also do development and design stuff. Less of it right now, just because we are in such a heavy edit stage on multiple projects. So I've been kind of jealous of Salem. So Salem's been doing a lot of fun design and development stuff, and I'm like looking at the Somerset Gazetteer for like the 80th time. But that's an important job too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how are you fitting all of this in? But it's more staged. Like you're bouncing
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah, I haven't designed anything in probably 6 months, I would say, because
We got to get you back.
we've been there's a 20 strong deck I've noodled on in like the small amount of free time that I have had. But yeah, I've been mostly, we have a new person who's going to be doing our rule book writing. Devin Norris we're trying him on rules, and so he kind of like changed how we were doing the rule books for, which I think you have. The rules for the Awakened Realms decks. So that was like a pretty extensive process for him to write those and for us to make sure that they were like working well in the edit, so I did a lot of that. And then yeah, now there's a ton of content for Elder Scrolls, the Heroes of Tamriel stuff, and so I've been mostly working on that. But that's hopefully going to be done with the major editing on that in May, and then I'll be able to do more fun stuff again.
Do all the fun stuff. So
Yeah.
Josh Carlson is a founder, lead designer, but now you're both credited alongside him on major titles. Like, what does creative ownership look like at Chip Theory Games?
Well, that's a good question. So we used to put box credits on the boxes, we don't do that anymore. And the reason we don't do that is because it really does take like a ton of different people to make a game, and not even just the people who are doing the design and development on it. Like, you know, the graphic design is so important and the art is so important, but also as we're talking about the customer service and the ops and getting it where it is so important. So we have like very extensive credits pages that kind of try to credit everybody in the company who worked on a project. As far as like the design and development goes, though, it just sort of depends on the project. So like for Elder Scrolls, there's a lot of people credited as design on that because like there were a lot of people involved in kind of like concepting that process or that thing out, and everybody handled different elements of it. You know, Josh came up with a lot of the initial concepts, but then, and especially as they relate to the battle or like the character mat and stuff. But then I would say Salem and I worked very extensively on like how encounters and like towns and overland movement and like the campaign structure would work, you know. And then other people worked more on like kind of undergirding rules and or like or classes and skill lines, how those would work and stuff like that. So that's like a big game, so it had a lot of different people working on it. You know, I don't think we posted like the credits really anywhere, and you know, it's like it's a little bit different on Board Game Geek than it is like in our rulebooks. But like, you know, Josh designed the system of 20 Strong like on his own, which is why you look and see for game design under in the core rules, it's just Josh's name. But then and he designed like the Solar Sentinels deck, and then we kind of contributed to development, which is why we're all credited game design development. You know, for these decks that are coming out right now, like we're still using Josh's design, and he also is still speaking into the decks. Like we show them to him and he's like, well, I don't love this maybe, or this is really cool, maybe try to emphasize this, you know, work on this. But then I would say that like I was the primary design on Tainted Grail, Salem was the primary design on Etherfields, and Logan Giannini, who is not on this call because he doesn't work here anymore, he works at Fantasy Flight now and is doing some awesome stuff over there, but he was the primary design on the Nemesis deck. So, which is cool because the 20 Strong decks are so fun to make because everybody like gets to kind of put you can kind of tell like who did which one, at least internally. I feel like I can tell because everyone kind of has different things that they like and different ways that they approach the process. It's fun.
I mean, that brings me to, you know, you mentioned 20 Strong and now working with Awakened Realms, you know, it launched as a system, right? And now you're trying to adapt some of the most beloved IPs in the entire industry, which is a ton of pressure, first and foremost. At what point did this system like reveal itself to being able to be adapted to different IPs and all of these different situations? And or was that like from the very beginning, the vision of I don't know, what I see is surprising variety in every time I read one of these rule books?
Yeah. I'm at, oh, go on. Sorry, Sam.
All right. Well, because I was just going to mention too, because I remember I'll try to be quick. But I remember the first round of this specifically, in regards to the versatility of this system. I remember when Josh Carlson showed us the core 20 Strong thing, and then like Ryan very quickly was like, ooh, I think I have an idea for a Too Many Bones deck. And I was like, oh, I think I've got an idea for a Victorum deck, actually. And I remember coming up with my first pitch for the Victorum deck, and I was not quite sure what 20 Strong meant at the time. Like, what defines a 20 Strong game?
You knew the rules.
I had
right?
only played, I knew the rules, and I had only played a version of Solar Sentinels. It wasn't called that at the time, and it was a different theme, but it still had the same 3 deck structure and very simple thing. And so what I did is I made another 3-deck structure game, but it's like, oh, but these ones are sport events and these ones are bloodshed events. And it still had the recruiting dice thing and it still had the primuses, but it was like, oh, there's a primus in each deck. You play through it and you fight the primus, you play through one, fight, but you can pick and choose how you want to go. And I showed it to him and he's just like, oh, this is just Solar Sentinels, but like with extra steps. And I'm like, yeah, what is that not what 20 strong is? And he's like, no, no, no. Like, think more
The
like
dice is the thing,
variety.
kind of like.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
dice is the thing. Everything
Yeah.
else is up for grabs. And then I actually that's when I chatted with Logan too, because Logan was the lead designer on Victorum. So I'm like, hey, I want your input on this. Like, what do we think? Like, how should we tweak this? And then that's where like the mountain layout was born, where you're like, but you're no longer able to just freely pick. It actually matters where you are, which I think now, of course, we see again. Like we saw a bunch of that in Tanglewoods. But now I've done it again in Etherfields, and Nemesis does it too. And it all started with that Victorum one specifically of like, hey, there is an adventure. Like we can use this to tell an adventure story, not just a raw battler. Like it, and I think that's, and then of course, like that was the first tipping point for me to be like, oh my gosh, this is very malleable. And then when I saw what Ryan and Logan designed for Tanglewood, seeing how that get pushed in more ways, and then once we got and then what Adam did with the Cloud Spire deck too, like very, very different. And so then I'm like, all right, I have essentially been told by both JC directly and by seeing these other decks designed, it's like 20 strong really can mean whatever we want it to mean. And I believe it has the potential to adapt into almost any environment. But yeah, that first deck was like the big tipping point.
That said, I would say that like we still want them to be, we want them to be recognizable, and
Right.
so I think I'm really pleased with like the diversity of these three that we're doing this time. I think these are the most different from each other, and also the most different from the other ones. I would say that like not that we haven't reached, not that we've reached our limits, but I think we've definitely experienced on this one some good kind of like walls in terms of like divergence, in terms of like what are the best things to diverge or not diverge. Like especially with like some of the Nemesis stuff, like realizing that okay, like the original version of Nemesis, like the way that you use dice was so different than it was in most other 20 strong decks, and it was confusing. And so we didn't standardize it fully, but we sort of like tried to figure out, okay, like are there plays of this, are there parts of this we can standardize a little bit more, draw back, that kind of a thing, because we want it can be lots of different things. We still want you to be like have in your head like, okay, well the dice work like this generally speaking, that is an important thing to us for sure.
Yeah, it seems like the elasticity is in the card format. Like you're much more kind of beholden to the dice and the round structure in how all of that works, but you really have had fun with the card format. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The dial too, weirdly, I would say.
Yeah.
We use the dial for a lot of stuff. And I can still hear you, Sam, I think.
I'm just showing off the dial.
So the first several, we use the dial primarily for counting points or counting rounds or counting gold and stuff. And then I think Sam and I both were like, we got to use this color side. Now, obviously, you can use the color side in sometimes when you're playing Cloud Spire as well. But I think we were really like, let's really get that going. So I think we both were like, how do we use it this way? And so like that's another weird thing where it's like we like having that, which is adding the chip was a pretty late thing in the process of making the original stuff, but like now we're always trying to be like, what's a different way to use the chip that we haven't used it before, which is kind of fun as well.
What was the foresight in the color side? Because it seems to me you would have had to have some sort of vision, down the line of all of these different decks on like how that would be used. But it almost sounds like you are finding ways to work within the rules of this system rather than like following a playbook that's, a multi-year plan.
Yeah, honestly, like the reason why the colors are on there, like, is not because of any it's like a foresight in terms of like someone being like, well, I guess we could use colors later. But it was mostly like, well, we had the number side, and we were like, well, the ship has to have something on the back, and then we were kind of like, well, it shouldn't be numbers again. It should be something else in case we would want to use the back, which is also why if you see like there's also like there's like a sun and a moon on the different sides of the chip as well, which we haven't used that yet. I don't know when we're gonna do what we're gonna do with that, but like and so if first we're talking about like, oh, maybe it could be symbols, or it could be colors, or it could be like the colors of the dice, but there's like different symbols on there. And then I think eventually, I think it was Josh Carlson was like, well, if we're going to do colors, just have the different like die symbols on there too, and it can represent the dice directly, and then we'll just figure out what we want that to mean later, you know. And then we didn't for a while, because then when we did Tanglewoods, those were much more, obviously those are very different from each other, but they're much more standardized into like kind of a meta structure. And so all of those had you were using the dial to track money, and it wasn't like your money is blue now or whatever, so it had to be numerical. And so I think this time Salem and I were really hungry to be like, let's get that thing flipped over, let's figure out what stuff to do with it. Yeah.
For fans of these giant IPs, like, how do you take a world so big and compress it into 20 dice? That has to be almost tougher than starting from the beginning, ground up with no constraints, and building a world.
I don't agree with that. I think it can be, but like one of the things that's like so nice about 20 Strong, and I'm not going to speak for Salem in terms of like how the Etherfields one came together, but I think one of the things that's so nice about 20 Strong is that like you do have creative limitations, like where you're like, well, I know that this thing has to be 20 dice and a dial and no more than 85 cards, that's our internal like box limit. And so like knowing that, then, well, this is the space I have to play in, so like I better figure something out, you know. Now there are certainly things that like would be harder than other things to like capture the vibe. Like for example, I know people have talked about, and we've talked internally about, like if we ever do like an Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era deck, which like I think we'll have to make some hard choices about like what to leave in and what to take out if we ever do that, and like how that would work and how we would be simulating the feel. But ultimately, it's like if I, you know, like especially for some like the Nemesis deck, I think is the one of them that is the most direct kind of like simulation of like the game itself. I think the question is just sort of like, how do you miniaturize this? Or if you're going to be kind of breaking off a chunk of it, like the Tainted Grail thing, it's sort of like, what is the interesting thing about this to me? Or like, what's the thing that like seems like the most card gameable? And then how do I turn that into a card game? You know, and I think that's one of the things that's so nice about these three, is that we took different approaches to it. So I don't know if we want to talk about like the individual ones.
Yeah, I just threw up Tainted Grail on the. That's where I'm headed next.
Okay. All right. Well, I can do that one first then, because that one was mine. So that one was a thing of just sort of me kind of looking at it and being like, okay, well, obviously exploration is a big part of the original Tainted Grail and the narrative stuff. And originally, I think there was an early pitch on this that was sort of like, well, what if we had an app or something that would like you could like read story entries, and like that would be pretty prohibitive for us to be able to build that. We don't really want to make extra components. We don't want something that like would have to be maintained later on. And also, like I knew that like the other two of the decks were using exploration and like movement and stuff. And so looking at the Tainted Grail combat system, though, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like there's like a deck building element to this. Now, obviously, Etherfields has an element of deck building as well. But I was like, I really like the way that the nodes, kind of like playing cards, like they match different nodes, how that works and stuff. And so I was like, oh, you can make something like really, really tight and really kind of like gritty and challenging and like thinky without having like a really lot of like extra rules or extra complexity. Like, you know, it's a complexity of choice, not a complexity of rules. And so like I was like, let's take this one part of Tainted Grail that I like and really focus in on that and like showcasing that aspect of it, and then giving you a lot of customization in that with all the different characters, and like having, each of the characters has their own unique hero ability and their own unique hero card that gets mixed into their deck and that kind of a thing. So like that was how I handled that. But then Salem, you had a different way that was you were doing with Etherfields.
Yeah. Also, too, I cut out a little bit, like I lost connection for a brief moment there, so I wasn't sure what the question that was asked, Ryan, that you were responding to earlier. But so if I say
No,
anything,
I think we have a good cut there.
Okay. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, with Etherfields, because I backed Etherfields, the original campaign. I got it. I tried to table it a few times. I don't think I was quite like, I hadn't quite gotten the feel of how to learn and approach big box games yet at the time. Because like even our games, I never had to learn. I was always just taught by people who knew it, and that's a lot easier to do for me. And so trying to dive into that. So like I tried to bring it to the table a few times, kept getting discouraged because I was just like not quite clicking. I think they also too like admitted their first rule book wasn't what they wanted it to be. So like I remember getting a second wave of stuff with a improved rule book. But I sort of like hadn't touched it. And then when we were like, hey, we're doing Awakened Realms, and I thought back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I remember being so enamored with Etherfields' like aesthetic, its lore, it's what I understood its gameplay to be. So I'm like, I want to dive back into that and possibly do that for 20 strong. And so I opened it back up. In fact, we actually got an all-in sent to us so that I could actually look at a lot more expansive. So I actually finally started to dive into it again. And I mean, as Ryan sort of explained, is like anytime you do a 20 strong thing, you have to be okay with cutting things. Like you have to just sort of look like, I can't adapt every part of this.
It's got to be hard, right?
Right. Oh, it's so hard. Yeah, because like
there's so many great elements in these giant boxes, right?
Oh
like
my gosh,
how do you pay service?
I love cutting stuff though. Like
you do.
I like even like when we adapt our own stuff. I'm just sort of like I'm like, what can because I love things that Sam and I have very different design, like I think spaces that we like to play in. And so Sam loves like an accurate like simulation, and I love to just be like simple, like again, like really a lot of good narrative, a lot of good like structural decisions, but like really easy to understand. You can just like dive in there. And so for me, I'm always like, how many limbs can I hack off here whilst and still have the thing be recognizably the thing, like that's a fun challenge to me. But yeah,
I was just talking to Chris Porter of Chris Couch Games, and he was talking about some of his influences and best design advice he'd got. Jamie Stegmaier had told him that anytime there's, especially in playtesting, there's like friction, don't add another rule to kind of get around it. Instead, cut it.
Yeah.
Like really focus in on what this thing is supposed to be.
Oh yeah.
Right. And just get rid of it instead of creating edge cases, more friction for the user, all of that stuff. Is that kind of how you all look at it?
Yeah, and it is hard sometimes if you're precious, but yes, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I oftentimes try to be like, is there a simpler way that we can capture the vibe of whatever that original rule was going for? I will say it is probably harder for me to say goodbye to something like that than it is Ryan, for example, but I have definitely learned to do it, and it feels good to do when you see how it turns out. But yeah, with like Etherfields, like the part I struggled the most, because like I saw as I was playing it, I was like, okay, influence cards, heck, we already have a great one-to-one comparison. Like we've got a game with green dice, yellow dice, and red dice. There's the 3 resources there. What if you can use those to supplement your hand? So that was like a really easy thing for me to just wrap my head around. And there was like other things too, where it's like, okay, that game has like the suits, like the card suits to indicate how things are going to go. Obviously, I'm like, I don't want to add more cards because that takes away how many influence cards or enemy cards or bosses you can have. So that's where it's like, oh, well, what about just creating like an ether dial, which isn't normally a thing in Etherfields. And now all of a sudden we're using the color dials in interesting ways. And that also by extension plays into the resource management of like, oh, I'll exhaust a yellow to move because I'll just get it back for free. But the one thing that I was just really, I struggled with for a while was the fact that Ether Fields isn't like a combat adventure game. It's more of like, I've seen somebody describe it as like almost like a puzzle escape room. And I love that. And I'm just like, I have no idea how to capture that. Cause like we've joked about the idea of doing like a puzzle deck 20 strong, but it's never beyond that. It's like, well, 20 strong is dice rolling. It is, I don't want to say it is combat because that can always be rethemed, but it is rolling dice, applying dice, taking things out and getting the rewards. So I was like, okay, I can't see a way forward to capture the escape room puzzle aspect of it. But the other part about that makes it so good is that whole dream like feel about how you are navigating a dream. You don't know what to expect. Things are going to change. They're going to be weird. And that's where I was just like, wait, like what if this deck changes with you and that captures that dream-like vibe? And so that's where the idea came, where it's like, okay, the cards have an A and B side, they have different things, and you don't reset it at the end of the game. You pick it up next time and you go through it again, and it'll constantly change. Like essentially, it's like once you play through your first game, your deck of Ether Fields is your deck of Ether Fields. Nobody else has one like it, and it'll keep changing like that. And I'll admit, I was like always a little bit nervous, like by being like, okay, yeah, I'm putting it out there, but you are still fighting enemies. And like, these are enemies that aren't enemies in Ether Fields really, like, or they're not even enemies at all. They're like abstract concepts your character has to deal with. And I was worried that it was like, oh, is it going to just feel like you are fighting a realization of a dark truth rather than that is a thing that is happening to your character and you need to sort of adapt to it and understand it. But I think like because it has that dreamlike nature, because the cards are changing, things are sort of very spontaneous and unpredictable in that way. I think it has captured that puzzly vibe and that escape room vibe in a way that doesn't seem so obvious. And yeah, that was probably the like the hardest part. Was just like, oh
Well,
gosh, I hope people like it.
Yeah, you hit on the two things that are super interesting. First of all, the exploration, like that seems like a fun thing to do, like an interesting thing to do. But on top of that, are you able to manipulate ether? That's essentially kind of like the goal, the escape room part.
Yes, yeah,
Ether
that's
color?
a great. Yes, I'm glad. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's actually like a slam dunk comparison. Yeah, because like the bosses require you to reach certain things in order to challenge them, and so it'll be like, okay, yeah, you have to get the ether to red, and it starts at yellow, and you have to find the different places in this dream that will let you advance it. And like that's probably the most straightforward one. But now that I'm thinking about it, like some of the bosses do have a good amount of puzzle to even activating them. So wow, good job, Salem.
Yeah, was that a happy
I put
little
that in
accident
there.
right there or what?
I
You shouldn't have said
honestly
that
have
because
to.
you're looking incredibly smart right now, because it does, to me, that system feels exactly like an escape room.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I
Yeah.
do enough
Salem loves
escape
escape
rooms.
rooms.
I'm up to like 90 on Morty, which is an escape room tracking app. The fact that I have an
What?
escape room tracking app, yeah, it's really great. Anyone out there who's loves escape rooms, Morty, Morty. It's I'll just do a quick plug. But I guess I don't know. Maybe that just carried over subconsciously.
That's
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of enemies. There's a lot of bosses in ether fields that you can't even fight until you get them unlocked. Like you wouldn't be able to choose any boss when you start playing the game
Right.
because
Yeah.
you have to like escape room them to find them in one playthrough and then play them in another one
because they have to get flipped.
Cool.
Yeah. Like so there's I don't want to spoil anything too much, but there is what I would consider a final boss, which there is a way to flip it way earlier than intended, but like that's okay.
Oh,
That's
that's so
also
cool.
really cool. But otherwise, like I could foresee people playing this deck for like 10 plus times before they even maybe realized that there was a secret boss in there.
That is
So
so cool. Well,
yeah.
so the other thing that really stands out is the legacy nature of this game. Like, was it always, we're going to flip cards? Did you have to fight any other kind of, I don't know, destructive urges that come with legacy games? Or was legacy kind of a non-negotiable in this design from the beginning?
It was actually a little bit later of an ad, not too late, but it definitely, because like again, going back to like when I originally came up with that first Hoplo deck, just not quite fully seeing the big picture of what 20 strong could be. So there was a part of me that was just like, yeah, the deck's got to go back into the box. But I also am like, well, we have a max of 85 cards, but that's 85 double-sided cards. The backs of those can be more, which means we can get up to more than double that, whatever the 85 times 2 is.
190.
Thank you.
No, that's
and
not right. 170.
170. There we go. Thank you. And so it's all of a sudden it's like, whoa, yeah, okay. But there's the question of if it's 170 cards, but like, how do you determine what side you should be using each time? So I think originally there was a degree in which like, oh, maybe you use one side when you're playing at the easier difficulties, then you use the other side when you level up and you get to the harder difficulties. But then it's like, well, then you're saying goodbye to maybe so many cards you really enjoyed. That's not very fun. And if it's like they all start on one side, but then different effects will flip them, you're just very rarely going to actually see some of the backside of these cards. And I don't know exactly what triggered it, but eventually I was just like, yeah, wait, like Etherfields has persistent things. It's a campaign game. Like you add cards to your influence deck that are new cards you didn't have access to before. That's changing your deck. And because we don't have the ability to put in a whole large sleeve of cards like Etherfields does, we're limited to 85. What's a way where we can have that be tracked like a campaign? And that's where that idea came up. And then, of course, I reincorporated that into the rest of the deck design to make sure it is highlighted really nicely.
Is the other side to every card highly intentional, meaning like it's from like a progression standpoint, it made sense in your design to make the other side the B side? Because it's not the same card, right? Because they can go to totally different types of cards.
For the map cards,
the back narratively linked, right, Sam? Like,
what was that?
A lot of them, they're kind of narratively linked, aren't they? Like a lot of them, where it's sort of like
a good amount of them. I'll be honest, I have not played through an entire campaign of Etherfields, so I can't vouch for every card back being narratively linked in the original game. But there is definitely intentionality behind what they do. So like the back of one card will sort of be an interesting inverse to whatever the front card is. That's not universal. There are some where we're just like, I want both these cards, and I think this would be a good pairing. There are other cards where it's a lot more narratively driven or things like that. And then like the influence cards, those were easy a lot of the time because especially for the character, like the character inspired ones. So unlike Tainted Grail, doesn't matter what hero you're playing as, you always get the same full deck of character cards. But some of those influence cards are pulled from their character specific ones in Etherfield. So like the tough guy has a couple of tough guy only ones in base game. Whereas in this deck, everyone can access them. But then I have the back side of it be a different tough guy. So it would be like, I can't remember exactly what their names are off the top of my head, but it would flip, and then all of a sudden you have access to the other tough guy card. And then like the bosses too, like there is a boss, again, I because this has like a bit of an element of surprise, I don't want to spoil too much, but there is a boss in this game that in Etherfields shows up as both a helpful influence card and one of the larger, like, I don't want to call them boss cards, but the larger entity cards. And while, again, a lot of the bosses in base Etherfields aren't bosses in the normal sense, or they're very different, we had to change that a bit. I was like, oh, I want to include that. So that's one where it's like it starts off as a boss, you fight the boss, and now you get that boss's version into your hand as an influence card in the next game.
Yeah, that was one of my
So
questions.
there's
Do
a
these always feel like a bane or a boon, and they're contextually like whatever made it flip? Is it, you know, if it was a bad consequence or whatever it might be, does it feel bad by when a player reads the other side, or will it feel random to them in some cases?
so you are allowed to look at the back of the cards as long as they're in the active area, and
Okay.
you can obviously you can look at it. You know, there's nothing saying like, hey, once you get your deck, you're not allowed to like just look at both cards. You absolutely could study the entire deck from the
Should you?
get go if you want to. I'd say no,
Right.
but
I
fun
I
not
wouldn't
the
say
idea of exploration and like surprise.
yeah. Oh, that's my. What are you? What? Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Getting a note not to manipulate this deck because this is currently an in progress
Oh.
play deck. So
What? I just
not
saw
gonna
you
mess with it.
flipping through it.
I don't think I messed anything up. But good to know.
Someone will drop their deck and just ruin their whole game. You know that, right?
So
Yeah.
somebody asked me that on stream one time, and I said like, well, this is all about dream and whimsy and fate and bizarre
I
things
like that.
happening. And so I
It's
would
fate.
just say, no, yeah, it's fate. It's not a mistake. That's what your dream has told needs to happen. And now just gather it all up in whatever way just immediately calls for you, and that's your deck from now on.
What does he say in what does he say in Christmas Carol? It's like it was just like you know, a bad piece of meat or like you know, cheese or something like that. That's what
Oh,
happened. So you ate something weird
yep,
when you
yep.
dropped the deck,
There's
and
more
then now it's all
gravy than
stuff.
grave about you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Uh, Yeah, and so as far as the question of like if it's a boon or a blessing or things like that, it really comes down to the card. I would say on average, most influence cards and item cards flipping is good. On
Okay.
average, most enemies flipping and maps flipping are bad. It is very contextual though, so you know, like
It's gonna
for example,
make sense.
yeah, and like a really good example, I think that I just want to highlight real quick. I know I'm talking a lot here, but again, this is on the A side. I'll make sure it stays on the A side. Are the map cards that advance the ether. So on the A side, it costs 5 awareness to do so, but it lets you recover all of the dice of the new ether value. So if it goes from green to blue, you then get to recover all the blues. That's pretty nice, but it costs 5. Whereas on the B side, it reduces the cost down to 3, but you no longer get to recover those dice. So contextually, that might be better or worse depending on where you are in a
Just
given
different.
run. Just different, yeah. Whereas like I'd say enemies and map cards, again, on the whole, are going to be harder on their B side than they are on their A side. Items and influences on the whole are going to be better on their B sides, with some exceptions, of course, because again, it's fun to keep people guessing. It's fun to have people have like, oh yeah, I don't mind flipping a card like in my hand. That's awesome. And they look at the back of them, they're like, oh, this turns into an enemy. I don't want that. Like, shoot, let me pick a different card. You know, things like that.
I mean, all of these decks feel like a departure. Etherfield feels like the biggest departure from anything we've seen in 20 strong. Is that true? I mean, Tainted Grail also with the deck building and such, but this one just feels so different.
I would say,
like
I think
Nemesis
actually, Sam, I
might
might think that Nemesis is probably the biggest departure.
Yeah.
Is it?
I
Just
would be my
because of the
personal
grid
vote, too.
exploration and the co-op nature and that type of stuff?
Well, there's
The co-op
yeah, I mean, so
nature,
obviously,
the enemies.
yeah, there's positional enemies. I mean, like there are some of positional enemy stuff, I guess, in like Cloud Spire and Rose, but like it's like they're in a very specific spot. The dice, the way you use dice is like very different in terms of like, you know, your recovery step is at the beginning and you roll dice different, like you're rolling dice to move and you're rolling dice like not roll to move, but you're rolling engages on your movement, you're rolling noise checks, you're rolling for your attacks, and then you're rolling to recover, or you know, you're rolling to salvage. Your salvaging is used in a totally different way than other like rolls, and you got your noise checks, and then there's also like the crits making noise element. like the noise meter and stuff. Like this is the one where we felt like we had to be the most cognizant of like rules overload in terms of like we didn't want to like assault everybody with like all these different changes. Where I would say that like Tainted Grail, even though like it adds the new element of like deck building, like is probably the most familiar to players who played like Solar Sentinels or whatever in terms of like the basic rule setup. I would say even more so Tanglewoods than, or even more so than like a lot of the Tanglewoods decks. I would say the Tainted Grail is like a little bit more. I don't want to say straightforward, but like a little bit more hewing to the core rule set. And Nemesis is the one to us, I think, that goes like the furthest afield, I guess.
Yeah, I want to get back to Nemesis, but we lightly went over Tainted Grail, and I honestly
Sure,
don't
sure.
know which one I'm more excited about. These all feel different and fun and new and fresh. I love deck builders. Is this a deck builder?
Yeah, I mean that was a big like it's a deck builder and it's actually like it's a, I mean, you know, in a mild sense, you don't have to build your deck better, I guess, if you don't want to.
Mm.
And I know some people who like don't like to fight the purple enemies to get the upgraded cards. But it's a deck builder in a way that like that also like takes out like a thing that I find irritating about deck builders, which is I love deck builders. Like DC Comics deck building game, one of my favorite board games. But shout out to Cryptozoic for that. But the one thing I don't like about deck building games is that when you add a bunch of cool cards, then like your deck gets too big, and then the cards that you have, like it's harder to get them and stuff. And so like I was like, oh, what if instead of like trashing, or what if instead of like trashing cards like being an actual like, normal action you take, every time you add a card to your deck, you just get rid of one. It's like one in, one out, you know, and which is an interesting decision space in terms of like, well, where, like, what do I want to get rid of, and like also like, how badly do I want to draw this card right away? Because
Mm.
like where you put the card determines like what you get rid of. Uh, but yeah, then also like it's just sort of like it takes that. It also just means that like I'm never going to have more than 10 cards, or you know, depending on what you do, 9 cards, like in my entire deck. So I'm going to be cycling through it, you know, relatively quickly and getting these kind of cards that I want to have. So there definitely is a deck building element of it, and then also like weirdly, and again, I'm, you know, credit to Tainted Grail for this aspect of it. Like there's a deck building element to it as well in terms of like how you play your cards. Like you're playing your cards in sort of the manner you would play in a deck building game, where the order you play them in and like how you're applying their effects also matters. Which was like the most appealing thing to me, was just in terms of like, how do I make it so that like every time you're playing the cards out, like the order you're playing that makes a difference, and like that also like triggers like all these different things you can do basically.
Well, the very first thing you were mentioning, which is the replacement of cards, you're getting rid of cards for good. You're making really tough decisions. Solves a deck building problem, and I think we probably agree on that problem. You outlined it well. Had you seen that in any other games? I can't remember if I've ever seen that particular mechanism to building decks before, because usually it's a feature to be able to mill cards out of your deck, or a decision later on with another card or another action or whatever it
Yeah.
might be, which is, you know, obviously like the cornerstone to building a good deck is being able to get rid of those crappy cards. Like, was there any influence there, or are you just trying to solve a problem that you saw?
Well, I don't want to say that this is a new idea or anything, because but so I guess I don't. It probably isn't. I'm sure there is a deck. There's a
Mm.
game out there that's like that. It is not one that I have run into. I would actually say probably the biggest influence on this decision is playing deck building games with my wife, who is better at them than I am.
Mm.
And one of the reasons is because she is really good at milling cards out of her deck.
Yeah.
And it's always annoying to me to watch her just like rack up all these cards. She's throwing them in the trash while I still have like, you know, useless like, you know, 1 power cards and stuff like that. So I was like, I just want to like, I want to just like, I want to have the part that's really the part that's really fun for me, which is like adding the cards, and then like there still is like an interesting decision there about like where you're adding it and what you're pulling out. but then I don't have to worry about like, oh, I've got this annoying card still in here, and now it's taking me longer to get the good card that I bought. Like, so it was honestly more. I would say I was influenced by losing to my wife at deck building games constantly. So
She's like, this is the one I'm going to beat you in.
well, it's solo too, so I don't have to worry about that either. But.
Did you ever? Was it always the case where you could put that card wherever you want? Because in most deck builders, going straight into hand is overpowered, and going straight to the top of deck is overpowered, and most go right into your discard, and you have to cycle them back through. Like, was that always a feature?
It was a consequence of the one in, one out system, actually, because I was like, well, I can't just have them go into your discard because I need them always to be able to replace something. So
because discard's not always full.
If the discard doesn't have anything in it, then I can't have them replace something that's in that spot. And so I was like, oh, well, but then I liked the way that it was working, because it's like, okay, well, the safest place to put it is your discard, because you most likely have stuff in there that like you either didn't want or you already used it. You're not really counting on it coming up again soon. So like that's the safest way to post it, but the safest place to put it. But also it's going to take the longest for you to get the good card out again. So that's kind of the risk reward thing. And then it's like the putting it in your hand, obviously you get it fastest, but then you probably have stuff in your hand that you want. And so like you're going to have to get rid of something maybe good, or you're going to have to kind of purposefully like save a card you don't like or don't care about that much in your hand to get rid of it. And so and then sort of like the putting it on top of your deck is sort of the devil's choice of like, you're like, well, how bad could this be if I do this? You know, and then maybe the answer is quite bad. You're not sure, like, because you don't know what's going to be. You can't check the top card before you put a card there. So that one, it's sort of like, I always like a big part of like a lot of stuff that I like to make here is like tempting you to do something stupid, like it's like, oh, this won't be that big of a problem, and then you do it and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Like, and so that's why I like you being able to put it on top of your deck. So
I think it creates a rich decision space. I think that's something that's not there in most deck building games. I haven't played this, but based upon what you're saying, I think you might have solved deck building. And I would imagine somebody's going to copy this system, because most board games are just kind of like standing on the shoulders of the next and kind of iterating. I would imagine that this gets copied at some place or at some point.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. I mean, I love deck building games. I would love, and I had a lot of fun making this, and I'm very proud of it. I would love to be able to work on like kind of like a proper deck building game someday.
I was going to ask that. You're taking words out of my mouth.
I really, again, I'm not very good at them. I'm fine. I'm not very good at them compared to my wife, who is like very, very good at like any kind of like point salad game. But I really do have a lot of fun with them. You know, I love playing Clank Legacy and like losing almost every single game of it. And like I said, I like getting beaten by my kids when I play DC Comics deck building and stuff. But I really enjoy them. They work really well in they just, I really appreciate them. So
I love asymmetry. I love progression in games, feeling more powerful. So deck building is definitely right up those alleys. I think some people have rightful criticisms, for a lot of, not being able to cycle through the deck enough, your deck getting too big, like, there's all of these different problems, but I love them. So you basically, to get this greenlit, you have to find a way to put chips and deck building together so we can get a chip theory full-fledged deck builder.
Yeah. It could happen. I think the other thing I would love to do is worker placement. And I have I have not had time to work on it like at all, but I have like an idea for worker placement. But it's like, again, if we did worker placement here, it would be a very different thing. It's like most of our games have been combat oriented, or, burn cycle is a little different, but like it's still, they're very kind of like units moving around in a physical space, which I think is another reason why I think 20 Strong is a really refreshing environment to play in, because obviously we do have some decks that are doing that there, but it feels different when they're doing it in that way. And also like there are avenues to do things that are not that as well. And again, I like games about moving units around a physical space too. I would say like probably my favorite board game of all time is Tannhauser, a now sadly defunct title that was published by FFG back in the day in English, and I think it was, I can't remember was a French game originally, but I love that game, and it's like kind of like a squad based like shooter game in like a the targeting system was like adapted into Unmatched. Like you can look at the Unmatched rulebook and see that like they adapted Star Wars Epic Duels and Tannhauser into that game, which both of which I own the original games of those.
Do you mean like the proximity based attack being on the right?
Like the color wheel, like the color wheel, like determining like line of sight and stuff
right.
is from
right.
Tannhauser originally. Yeah, love that game, and that is a game about moving guys around on a board and doing things with them. So like that's great too. But I love variety. Like I love doing different kinds of things always. So deck building or worker placement or whatever, I would love to be able to do that kind of thing one day as well. So.
Before moving on to Nemesis, I'm really interested in the node system. That's the other thing that piqued my interest here.
Mm-hmm.
The physical manifestation of stringing together these cards and combos. Do they feel like they're comboing? Like what went into the design of the nodes and the card play here?
Yeah, well that one I do want to give a ton of credit to, and I should actually look up the name. Although I'm probably not going to be able to pronounce it because it's very Polish. But the designers of Tainted Grail, because like obviously this is an adaptation of Tainted Grail. I'm going to make some typing sounds. Sorry, so I want to, and I do apologize to Krzysztof Piskorski and Marcin Swirkat. I'm not sure if I said that the right way. So, but you can go look at their names and how they're correctly spelled on BGG. When I started like working on this, like the system of the nodes was what was really interesting to me originally, and so like I took that and I made it simpler in the sense that like it needed to be simpler for a small card game than it did for a large board game, but like that the idea of like you have to match the nodes to like get the most out of your play comes from that board game. So I don't want to take too much credit for that, but like I did want it to feel like you were comboing. And even like I think one of the things that I'm most pleased with the deck and how it turned out is that all of the hero characters have their own unique starting card, so you get to have the fun of like your hero's ability, but you also get this kind of additional thing that is like adding a new dimension to the characters, and oftentimes those will like relate to the character in like the character's hero ability in some ways. For example, like I can't remember which hero it is, but there's like one hero that like lets you like damage yourself to like do stuff, to do additional actions or to I don't know, deal damage. I can't, again, I don't have them right in front of me. And then like her that character's like card
T-Bolt.
just allows you a Tybalt, that character's card allows you to heal. So when you play that card, you're sort of like you're kind of like comboing the card off of the character's ability and stuff like that. So they were all sort of like meant to kind of complement their hero ability. But then, obviously, I was just, Daniel over at Think Gaming, he posted his playthrough of Nemesis today, the day we're recording this, and it was really, really fun to watch because he played against one of the bosses, and I think he ended up playing like 6 cards on the boss, like in the over the course of like 2 or 3 engages, because he just kept on figuring out ways to like combo strike against and stuff. And so it was really neat. He's like, okay, well I can play, oh no, if I play that one, then I won't be able to connect this one. So I'll play this one first, then I'll play this one. That gives me the node setup that I need to do this other one, which is like, that's the most satisfying thing about the whole game, I think, probably, is to be able to be like, I cannot beat this right now, but if I play these cards in this order, then I can maybe do it, that was what I liked the most about it.
With those nodes, do you feel like players have more agency in this design as compared to the more just dice heavy reliances in other 20 strong designs?
Well, so I would always push back a little bit on, like, obviously you are somewhat at the whims of, you have a bad roll, but I think that a lot of people who have an issue with the game with 20 strong early in play, like, I think it's just like you have to see through the matrix. I think you would agree with this, Salem, probably, right? Like you kind of have to like see through the matrix of 20 strong and realize that it's not actually a game about rolling dice. It's a game about like resource management, and it's a game about like manipulating the mechanics within each individual deck that you're playing. Because like like for example, like I remember like there was a lot of issues with testing the Too Many Bones deck because people were just really not like understanding that like, well, I have to defeat all these guys and I have to defeat them as soon as possible. I don't like getting hurt, and so I'm going to just run out all of my dice. And it's like, well, but you don't have to do that in that game. Like you want to roll some misses so you can use them in your backup plan. And you also sometimes are going to be like, okay, well, I can tank this hit. That will allow me to recover dice, and then I can beat the guy the next time or whatever. And so, like, I do think that like all of these games are more controllable than I think sometimes people give them credit for. And you have to just kind of figure out when you're playing a new deck, what is the element that I'm able to control here? Like, and whether that's like where you end up in ether fields is I think a big part of like that is like, or like how you put the rooms together. It's like you can get totally messed up in ether fields if you like connect rooms in a bad way. But if you connect rooms in a good way, then you can set yourself up for these like insane runs through like the dream and like do a lot of stuff and accomplish that. And so like even though you can't necessarily control like what your dice are going to do when you roll them, you can control like all of these other things that are kind of mitigating like your dice being bad to a degree. And so I would say that like I think that the honestly to me the cards and the nodes and the cards and stuff in Tainted Grail, they're not mitigating dice rolls because most of them still are just telling you can apply more dice to this thing. It's like what they're mitigating is they're mitigating the other restriction that the game puts on you, which is that usually you can only apply 4 dice in a given engage in the Tainted Grail deck until you start playing the cards, and that's more what they're mitigating rather than like the dice randomness.
Yeah, I recently interviewed Cole Worley, and we had a very similar conversation about luck, and specifically we were talking about arcs. Dice rolling is always criticized as just like this luck based mechanic, but his point was if you get to a point where that one roll cost you your game, you probably made 30 or 40 other decisions behind that that actually influence you to get to that point. So one of the interesting things, I did some analysis on arcs on Cardboard, my platform, where people were rating the fans of it rated luck significantly lower than the critics. The critics all thought that luck was a 7, while the people that absolutely loved arcs thought it was more of like a 5. And my hypothesis is that luck starts to go away in a game, at least your perception of it, the more you play it, because then you start to realize these nuances and the metagame and all of these like important aspects that actually go into that eventual roll of dice. Do you see it the same way for both of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because I think all the decks we've made are really cool, but I think that internally we probably have a different perspective on like which ones of the decks have more like RNG than some of the fans internally or externally, and because I think we're just more aware of like how you might need to navigate that. I've seen a fair amount of people say, for example, and I'll use this example because this is like one of the ones that I designed, but like Tanglewood's White, that one has the most RNG out of any of the Tanglewoods decks. But I actually kind of think that it has the least because like you are way more in control of like where you're going and so it's like, yes, you can't see the next step in the forest unless you've paid gold to like flip it over, and then you can. But it's like usually you can't see the next step of the forest. You don't know what card you're going to draw, but when you step on there, okay, these are the likely modifiers that I'm going to be facing because I can see what all the modifiers are. I can see the cards that are in like kind of the hunt deck, and so I can see like, okay, I can pick from this, or this. I know. And also like when I go to the shop, I can pay to basically like pre-scout the woods. I can pay to scout like which mini bosses I'm going to be fighting, all this stuff. And so it's like, yes, like there is more randomness there if I'm not pulling on all the levers the game has provided me. But if I am pulling on the levers the game has provided me, then as you're saying, it's like it's rare that like one. It's not like it's one bad roll is going to sink me. It is much more likely that like the bad roll is the straw that broke the camel's back because maybe I wasn't quite exercising. Obviously any game with dice rolls, you can just have kind of a bad run, and like certainly we want all the games to be hard enough. I certainly lose 20 strong games that are already out now when I play them later. But like, yeah, there's usually like a confluence of things that have kind of led to that moment, and it's with really in any game. I'm not saying that our games are not unique in this regard. It's like any game that you play, part of playing it is sort of like discovering all of the breadcrumbs that the designers have left for you to manipulate the game to your advantage.
Right. Salem, do you feel similarly about critics that will say chip theory games are all about luck?
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. In fact, actually, I remember talking about this a lot at conventions when we had Hoplomachus Victorum out. So, like, with that being a reimagining of our first system, people like who never played the original Hoplo are now seeing it for the first time. And this is a post Too Many Bones world. And what I mean by that is like
Yeah.
we have seen the backup plan. And the backup plan to me is probably my favorite thing we have designed in any of our games ever. And I think we've only improved upon it with like the tenacity system in Elder Scrolls. I love it so much. Even in Burn Cycle, like 2 misses can be combined to a 1. And so then now we have Hoplo come out, and it brings back the whole a miss is a miss. There's nothing you can do with it. And there's a degree in which like when players
it's
like
a rude
in this
awakening.
post yeah, and but what we always made sure to do though is like so like there's those situations where yeah, you can have a bad roll and your opponent can have a really good roll. But neither of those two situations should be the thing that makes or breaks a scenario. It's like oftentimes I think maybe what happens is people don't realize they have put themselves in such a bad strategic position and are banking on a really good roll to save them,
But
and they
those are the
don't get
most
that really
fun.
goal. I know, right? That's why I love dice rolling too. Is I
Yeah.
do love how it's like you should never give up a dice game because
Right.
it can bail you out. Where on the flip side is I don't think a dice game should ever just purely through and if it's a multiplayer game then maybe because both sides need to be on even playing there, but when it's a solo or co-op game, it's like I absolutely think a good dice roll should save you from losing a losing situation, but a bad dice roll should never cause you to lose a winning one. And like I think that's true in all our games, or at least that's we're always trying to strive for that. And so, like when, for example, to Nemesis, we added enemies rolling dice. And the first thing we notice is like, oh gosh, if an enemy rolls 2 dice and it rolls 2 crits and it can just kill you, no, we can't have that. And so, pretty early on in the development process of Nemesis, we're like, okay, enemies do roll dice, but crits don't deal more damage, they just increase noise. So that you can always just be like, all right, I am never going to take more than at most 2 damage from this enemy. And you can plan for that. Whereas if the scale is like, well, it could miss completely, or it could hit me for 4, that's way too big of a variance. And also your health is like in 20 strong is at most 6. Like that's not going to save you against a 4 most of the time. So that was a very quick thing we like realized. And yeah, with like going back to Hoplo, like that is a full tactics game. That is absolutely not just tactics, but squad building too. Like in Victorum, especially, like part of the game strategy is taking your time to recruit the best gladiators. Don't just like recruit whoever's available. Be intentional. Like look at the stadium, see who has one you want. Go do a mission there to try and get it. obviously then you start balancing your character build and your prowess cards, all of these things to sort of hone in on a given strategy. And the dice are just mainly there to be like, okay, but don't get too cocky, because if you get a bad roll, you need to be able to pivot. And so I love dice rolling. I truly do. That said, though, I love the backup plan and the tenacity systems so
Yeah.
much, because
Well, I think that's what separates your dice rolling, right? Is having a strategic consideration on, with misses. I think that's a super important thing. And I think that's where a lot of people's argument on, in too many bones in particular, and the randomness and the bad beats that you can get, there are a lot of mitigating factors that you are allowing a user to kind of play with. I was going to push back on you a little bit with too many bones, because I've had some incredibly bad beats. But you also mentioned, like in Hoplo, it's all about building your team. It's also about what you trained in Too Many Bones, right? Like, there's, to Cole's point, I made these decisions to train skills and train stats and all of this other stuff leading up to that point where that baddie just crushed my dreams and ended my day. So,
And usually in Too Many Bones too, I think when you get totally just like completely stomped, it's not necessarily a die. Like the problem isn't necessarily the dice. It's the problem is your initiative being lower.
I was just going to say, initiative is what's broken there.
Which is obviously,
and player
love Too Many Bones, but like that's something we did try to address with Elder Scrolls, which not to everybody's satisfaction, because some people think that it allows too much like alpha striking, and we're looking at a different way to do it again in Too Many Bones too. So we're trying to learn. We do a lot of testing, but also it's like the first time you release a game, more people will play it than you could have tested possible.
The first day you get more play tests on release, right?
Yeah.
Than you ever could have ever simulated yourself.
Yeah.
And
maybe we'll also release a different way of doing initiative. We already have like the difficulty modifier for Elder Scrolls, but I know we've talked about like maybe one of the Daedric princes in the future like affects your initiative or something. So we're talking about more.
Very cool. You were going to say something, Salem?
Oh yeah, just to quickly go back to like misses and 20 strong, because like I say, I hype up the backup plan of tenacity, but then of course most of the 20 strong decks you can't really use misses to a meaningful degree. But again, that's where it's like I feel like it's such an easy trap to fall into, where recovery is the best strat or best stat to increase, and recovery is very important. But like I think that's where like the strategy stat, like when I first started playing the game too, and then trying to design for it and everything, I was also like, oh yeah, recovery. I want to get these dice back. But having a high strategy stat, like having a 6 in strategy, I would say is way more powerful than having a 6 in recovery. Because it's like, okay, yeah, you can get bad dice rolls, but like the more times you can roll, the more times you can re-roll and re-roll again and again and again to get for those crits, to bypass the misses, it's game changing. Like, and then of course too, if you have a high strategy, you also can have a lot more items, which can help you mitigate the randomness too, as well. So like, sort of, again, going back to that original decision, like if you lose a game because of a bad die roll, if the game is well designed, I should say, there's probably games out there where you could be winning and a bad die roll just immediately causes you to lose. That never feels good. But what we're always going for is making sure that if you have a bad roll and you lose, you were already losing. And that you just didn't get the winning roll you needed to come back from it.
Right. Yeah. You didn't get the godsend roll.
Right.
You were already teetering on death. So is strategy broken?
Is strategy broken? Oh, no, I would not call it broken.
Overpowered?
I wouldn't even call it overpowered. Okay. No, because
I'm just trying to clip you real quick for the shorts.
I'm just saying it's way stronger than people think when they compare it to recovery. That's all I'll say. I'd say like once you get to recovery 4, if your strategy is still at 2, and you have options, of course, sometimes you might not always be given the option to just increase strategy, but like at that point, prioritize finding ways to increase your strategy over your recovery. And I would honestly say like once your recovery is at 4, I'd say focus entirely on strategy until it gets to 6. Then at that point, you can go back to recovery. Of course, too, health you never want to ignore as well, because like health is a spendable resource. Tank a hit. Don't commit any dice. The enemy goes away, or you have other ways to deal with the enemy besides rolling dice. Just take the hit, get the free dice, and continue. Like you never lose a game from losing health. You only lose the game from losing your last health. So
yeah. Well, I think too, I mean, like we're also always trying to find ways to like emphasize strategy too. Like for example, like that's how you do, strategy also like determines how many times you can strike in Tainted Grail and stuff. This is why I love to make one strategy heroes, like with the one strategy starting stacks. I like to torture people. So
oh my gosh, those are the hardest ones for me to play. Like I'll take a 1 recovery over a 1 strategy hero.
You have
I love
more
them,
work
though.
to do,
Like it's,
you know?
Right, yeah.
Again, that's just part of me being like, can I convince people to make a bad decision here? Like it's like we're like, I'll probably be fine with this many dice, or
You're baiting that
I need
Reddit
to throw
post.
way too many dice.
You know that, right?
Like one or the other. Yeah.
All right, so we don't have the lead designer for Nemesis here. However, I do want to ask the question: why did you all ruin crits for us?
Well, no, I mean you still, the crits still count as crits for damage that you roll, but yeah, there's the noise. I mean, like,
but they create noise.
That was one of the.
Yep.
Yeah, that was one of the first kind of actually design decisions about this. I remember that Logan was talking about, which I do think is really cool. You're right. It does kind of like ruin them, but also it's like even that it sort of goes back to the resource management thing that we're talking about, especially when you're playing it multiplayer, where I think a thing that we love to do when we're playing it in the office is basically get it as close as possible to the noise ticking up, and then being like, all right, now it's your turn. So that way that the alien will come out on them instead of on you. So there's definitely ways to use it. Yeah.
That's great.
That's like a key strat if you're playing the game, because it's semi-cooperative, right? So it's like you all can win, and you usually do want to help your players out originally, but like ultimately, like most times when you're playing that game, you get to a point where you're like, all right, I have to go help myself. See ya. Like it's kind of like how most games have end, which I really like, and so yeah, there are definitely ways that you're kind of like manipulating the crits and the noise level to your advantage as well, or even just like stuff like when you're you sometimes like you want crits to roll crits when you're doing salvaging, because like that gets you more dice you can recover or things like that. And also it's like sometimes you might want a crit to happen because you're like, okay, well, like I have a couple of actions left. Rather than this guy coming out on the next turn when I want to be doing something, I actually want the alien to come out now. So hopefully I roll enough crits now to tick the noise over, and then I can fight that guy with my last action on this turn. So there's lots of like, it's not like a purely negative thing to make noise in this game. It's like, it's not typically ideal. It's like, generally speaking, you don't want an alien to attack you, but like sometimes you do. Like sometimes you're like, okay, well, how, like what it's more of a question of like, when do I want this alien to come out? Like, do I want it to come out on my turn and then I can handle it now, or do I want it to come out on Salem's turn and they can handle it then, or something else? So it's not a purely negative, I would say.
Are you still rolling noise as you go into rooms like the original game?
It depends on the room.
Yes.
Because like some rooms will have it'll be listed as like, this is what you need to do to activate it. It's called a noise check. And that was also too a way where we wanted to try it, because we're always looking for ways to make it so that you like the dice you recover isn't always obvious. Like it's not always, oh, get the red, then always the purples, then always the blues, and so on. So like that's where we had the idea of like, oh, anytime dice are rolled for like a non-action, they're rolled first from exhausted, then from your dice pool. So it actually benefits you to have a pretty diverse exhausted dice pool, because you'll roll these noise checks, and if they're in exhausted, perfect, you don't exhaust them. But if they're not, you have to pull them for your dice pool and then exhaust them. And so, yeah, that would just determine, did you make any noise upon activating this room? But a lot of the rooms also have other ways to activate them that don't increase noise. Perhaps they'll activate for free if a different room is active, or this one you can discard an item to do it quietly.
Or you just add an enemy.
Or you just add an enemy, which,
Yeah.
I guess technically doesn't increase noise. But there's like, it's not necessarily a blanket rule of every time you go into a room you do a noise check. It's part of the way the rooms activate. And then also too, part of the movement action is when you move, you commit dice to sort of be like, all right, I'm going to roll these, do my strategy phases. And crit still lets you move with them, but they'll increase noise. And that's where you like have to make the decision like, okay, well, I got enough movement points. I like to move 3. I rolled 3. That's perfect. That's what I want. But one of them's a crit. Do I risk re-rolling and hopefully not get another crit to be able to make that movement? Or do I risk it and maybe I don't get enough movement the next time, or I get multiple crits? So there is ways where like movement and just general play is going to be increasing noise over the course of the game. But with the strategy phase, there's a little bit of interesting decision space to be made with it.
With the hidden trader slash semi co-op nature of the game, has there been any interesting metas that have come up around the office, or even rivalries or intense sessions that have happened?
Well, there is that. There
what
is
Ryan
what
said was really good.
The crit, yeah, the crit kind of like crit edging, I guess. I don't know what you call it, but like
clip it,
trying to kind of like have that stuff like trigger on someone else's turn. I would say also, yeah, I mean, like all of us are kind of like too nice to be like really, really ruthless. I think it's not because you can lie and stuff.
Yeah,
Or like lie about your
like
intentions.
That. I think that
we
creates
don't
fun
really do
narrative,
that in our office,
above the table narrative in games.
Yeah, that we don't really do that in most of our games, but that's certainly like a thing you could do. I would say one I really like is Sam, do you remember which room it is that has like kind of the ability to like open a room that is not normally openable?
Yes, that's my favorite room in the game.
Yeah.
I'll look for it real quick here.
So there's one room that you can discard some items to like get a room like open like before you would normally be able to activate it, and you just kind of like dip out like way early before other people and just kind of like leave them to deal with the mess. Because that's one of the things that's interesting about the game is that like the player count determines kind of like a lot of the difficulty in terms of like how many rounds you have left, when the self-destruct timer like flips over, like some enemy strength or enemy damage type stuff. And that does not change when people leave the game. So like if we're playing a 3-player game and I escape, the difficulty level is still kind of calibrated to a 3-player game. So like if you leave early, then you're leaving the other 2 players to deal with like a 3 character difficulty level on their own. So that's like an interesting like thing to consider as well sometimes.
It is the servers, and it also allows you to deactivate a room as well. So if you ever are in a situation where like, I think probably, I don't think I did this in the stream, but there was that gameplay stream where we played through all 3 decks during CTG week, and I notoriously like was playing nice because that seemed like the best call until the end of the game, and I just left Andrew Santoro high and dry. But like you can use the server to be like, I have, I'm looking at my objectives, and each objective card has mostly objectives that are either you can complete these and they don't require you to sabotage others, or you actually want people to succeed in order to complete these. But they always have at least one that's like, yeah, you do kind of need to sabotage someone, but you don't have to get all of the objectives. You just have to get a certain number of points. So I was playing the whole game just thinking like, okay, no, I don't need that sabotage one. I'm good. I'm gonna play nice. And then because of when Ryan left, he devoided me the opportunity of completing one of the competitive objectives. So by Ryan leaving when he did, I all of a sudden have to be like, oh no, I have to leave Andrew here to die.
That's my favorite. Oh, go on. Sorry.
So I mean, it was just like, okay, all right, yeah. And I don't think I use the server specifically, but that's where the server can be really good because you can just be like, okay, well, I mean, the last person needs to get into the escape pod to leave. The escape pods require the engine rooms to activate or the generators to use. So I could use the like, and I'm already in like, let's say, or I'm right next to an escape pod that's already active. You could use the server to deactivate one of the engine rooms, hop into the escape room, and then run away. And now all of a sudden the other person's like, shoot, I can't
I
activate that
love that.
escape pod I was going to go to. I have to now go reactivate that engine, which increases noise, and then make my way back to the escape pod.
And
So
that
yeah,
server room's not always there. It's randomized.
it's
It,
so all of the cards are always there. It's just so there's no room cards that aren't used.
Okay.
It's just
So
everything is
there's
shuffled
always
and
a
face
chance
down.
of someone doing that and lying about
Yes,
what's
Yeah.
underneath
yeah.
that card and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
there's always that sense of distrust, you know, when you
Mhm.
know that capability exists in later games.
Yeah. That is my favorite part of the game, though. I think when you're playing it co-op, anyway, is like the moment where you decide it's time to get yours. You know, like where you're like, okay,
Mhm.
like, this is real now. I got to get out of here. Like I always love that feeling.
Is
I
this
mean,
the
the
most
best part
faithful?
of it.
Go ahead, Salem.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I was just gonna say the best part about that game in particular that we played is I absolutely sabotaged Andrew so much to the point where I was like, "There's no way he's getting out alive," and yet he still did. And so, like, I think that's why, like, that was the one thing I was always nervous about with like sharing a dice pool in Nemesis is like, how do we make it where if you sabotage someone, you know, it's not just a situation of like, oh, they have no way of coming back, but through a very clever use of items and rooms and the salvage effect, he was able to just be like, okay, no, I can adapt. I can overcome this. And yeah, anyway, sorry, I just wanted to say that one bit real quick there.
No worries. Is this the most faithful recreation of these 3 games?
Yeah,
Oh.
I was gonna say that earlier. I think this is the most faithful simulation, and then I think
Mhm.
mine is like simulating a part, and then Salem's I would say is a much more kind of like spiritual adaptation of like, which is appropriate given the subject matter, but like it's like Salem is like recreating the vibe, and then I'm kind of recreating like a one part of it, really kind of like trying to make that part really crunchy, and then Logan was like, I want to try to simulate the game kind of like, you know, out of the box, and then, you know, we kind of then put some additional refinements on it in terms of like figuring out some things to cut or add or whatever. But like ultimately, like it's the one that feels kind of most like mini name of the game. You know?
It really does. It based upon what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's going to feel like Nemesis when you're playing it.
I hope so.
I mean, one of my playtest groups for it were big Nemesis players, and so I invited them in to play it, and they were just like sitting there like, "Whoa, yeah!" Like, I mean, they didn't straight up say I would rather play this than Nemesis, and I would hope that's not true because they're, you know, different games. But they were very much so like, oh, if yeah, this is like the perfect way to play Nemesis if you want to guarantee like, okay, I don't want this to take X
Mm.
amount of time to play because Nemesis can be a
Yeah.
very
Oh,
like a
yeah.
whole afternoon kind of game, and I love that about it. But sometimes, like, depending on how everyone's feeling or how much time people have, or if people are like, hey, I want to play the same game multiple times, you can still get that Nemesis feel, and it doesn't feel like it loses anything because anything that it does lose because it's objectively not there is like, well, it's a 20 strong thing. So you get all the things that 20 strong brings to the table
Mhm.
to sort of supplement that. But yeah, no, I think I would say, yeah, it's probably safe to say this is the most direct, faithful, one-to-one adaptation of a 20 strong deck yet.
Yeah, and I
Mhm.
also think it's probably fair to say from like a price perspective, seems like it would be an incredible value relative to the experience that you're getting here, which feels very much like a big box, highly interactive, you know, multi-person game experience. So how many players does this play up to?
1 to 3.
1 to 3? Couldn't get 4 in
Yeah.
there?
No, because your stat dice. Well, first it's not balanced for 4, but also like your stat dice are your players in this. That's actually and the reason and which is why your recovery and strategy stats in Nemesis are primarily, with some exceptions, static. You can't really increase them or decrease them. You can only increase or decrease your health because like your health is being measured on the individual dice. So the game only comes with 3 stat dice, so you can have 3 players basically.
Has any of the original designers played these? And what's the feedback been? Or did you get any pushback?
I don't think so. I mean, I can speak a little bit to their feedback. I don't think that they've played them. They might have. We've sent them stuff, but you know they're over in Europe, and they've got lots of other things going on as well. But like they've definitely checked them out, and they've approved them and okayed them. I will say for the Nemesis one, they were really like wanted to make sure that it was like capturing a few vibe related things that they didn't feel like in the first round were quite all the way there. And so we went back to the drawing board with a couple things and kind of added them, and they seemed to like those changes. So like, for example, I think mostly they just wanted it to feel more like you were like that you were really like being like hunted, and that there was like a lot of like uncertainty about what was going on. So for example, like one of we don't have to go through all the things, but like I would say 2 of the things that we did, which I do think made the game a lot better, were even though it was fun, the first time, but I think even these were helpful, is that we took rewards off of the aliens. This is the only 20 strong game where the enemies like don't give you stuff for defeating them, and because they were sort of like, we don't want you, like in Nemesis, like you were like, oh, I want to go kill an alien to get something good. It's like you only ever want to kill an alien so the alien doesn't kill you, like
Yeah.
and so
like thematically, it doesn't make a lot of sense to you to pull anything off of them.
Right. And another thing we did is they were like, it needs to be more. They were like, because originally we were just saying like noise goes up by 1 automatically at the start or at the end of every turn, and they were like, that's too predictable. Like it should feel a little bit more like you're risking something. And so we changed it, so now you actually roll your strongest exhausted die, and that will determine how much noise will go up. It could go up 0, 1, or 2 depending on what you roll, and which I think has been really fun, because sometimes you're like, okay, well, I have 2 left. I'm probably okay. And then you roll a crit and you're like, oh, I have to move it up 2. Yep. and then it does activate. Or it also kind of encourages you to be like, okay, well, maybe I'm going to recover these dice, and I'm only going to leave like this level of die in here. So maybe you're like, okay, well, I don't want to apply this die to the enemy because I won't be able to recover it because it'll still be applied to the enemy, because then that means that will be the strongest die. And so if I have a red that's not been recovered, then I know it's going to increase by 1. Whereas if my strongest die left is like a blue, maybe it doesn't increase at all, which could be nice, So those were a couple of things. They just were basically kind of like make it scarier, make it feel more uncertain, I guess I would say. So they definitely were tapped into like what the rules were and stuff. If I'm not sure if they actually physically played them though.
Who's been easier to work with, Bethesda or Awaken Realms?
I cannot talk about it. Like I'm actually not allowed to talk about that. I will say that like any truly like any licensing agreement that you have, like the people who are like who you're working with, like they care a lot about their thing. It's like, and I'm sure if we like licensed Too Many Bones out to somebody else, we would have a lot of notes about whatever they were doing. And so like they're concerned about it. And so sometimes you're not always going to agree with the notes you get back. Sometimes you will though. Like I would say that like I do think that ultimately they didn't, and I would say that like Awaken Realms were good about. One thing I really appreciated about some of their notes is that they were like, well, here are our notes. We didn't necessarily agree with all of them, but we definitely saw where they're coming from with a lot of them. But they were very gracious in terms of like not being like, so what you should do is X. They were sort of like, the vibe doesn't feel right to us. So maybe you could do this, but ultimately like, here's the feedback. You figure out like how you want to change this to make it work. And that was good. Like that would be we did really appreciate that. Like, and I think that like ultimately like I'm, you know, as someone I am the person who like is kind of on the front lines of taking the notes for Bethesda, you know, on Elder Scrolls stuff, and I am, you know, was one of the people who was the kind of the first people to take the notes on the Awakened Realms stuff too, and that can be a frustrating experience sometimes. But you're also like, well, everybody wants us to be good,
Mhm.
and everybody like and like what they're just trying to make sure that like you've taken their baby and are making sure that you're showing it off in the way that like that is accurate to the spirit of the thing. And so like I do try to keep that in mind every time you do have a note. And so, and generally speaking, it's like, you know, we work, especially with Bethesda, we work with them. We mostly communicate with the Awakened Realms guys via email and stuff. You know, we have a meeting like every other week with the Bethesda folks. And so I know all, you know, those people we work with, and they're all, you know, they all want like this to work out in a way that makes sense to them. And, you know, no one's trying to get in anybody's way. And I hope that they feel the same way with us. If we're like, oh, well, what about this? I don't think that they're probably being like, like they're being so stupid or whatever like that. They're probably like, okay, I understand. Like they're trying to accommodate the concerns they have when they're making their thing. So, you know.
When am I going to see a Fallout adaptation from you guys?
Well, I mean,
I love Fallout. It's
I
so
don't
cool.
know. I don't know.
That world is so wonderful.
I don't know. I don't know that you necessarily will, but you might. I'm not saying you won't either. It
could be a cool deck builder.
Sure. Yeah. I think that it. And I think if you did, you might not. It might not be in a way that you expect either. It's like these are certainly discussions we've had internally, but like, you know, we do like working on our licensed stuff, and I think we're proud of what we've made this license. But like, I think most of us, like, our passion does lie with like creating original worlds, you know. And it's like, and that's why you like Fallout, is because once upon a time, like someone had the idea to make Fallout. You know what I mean? Like,
100%.
And so it's like, not to say that we would never do that kind of thing, because we're very proud of Elder Scrolls, and it's been a huge success for us, and I'm very pleased with that. But like, you know, if we put out Too Many Bones too soon, and that becomes a very successful thing for us, it's like that might be like kind of our flagship game for a while. It's like, you know, Elder Scrolls is not a coincidence that Elder Scrolls came out kind of as Too Many Bones 1 had kind of like reached its sort of content complete stage, you know, Trover notwithstanding. Like, so, you know, we want Too Many Bones 2 to, we still definitely have a lot of juice left for Elder Scrolls. And so I don't know that we would necessarily be like releasing a big box Fallout game while we were still releasing Elder Scrolls stuff. That would, just for one thing, that would be like a huge strain of the company's resources, because making that game is a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
But also it's like we want to make sure that there's a lot of runway for Too Many Bones 2 to be successful for a number of years as well. So
when you put it like
you know,
that,
there's other ways. You know, we could make a 20 strong deck if we don't do a big box game, or, you know, we've talked about different things. So
well, Too Many Bones 2, I am more than happy to receive instead of a Fallout game. So that's all good. All right, so this is the last one. Ryan, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, you wrote 20 Strong is one of my favorite things I've ever contributed to in my 5 years with the company. At this point.
I probably did write that somewhere. Yes, I would say that's accurate. Yes.
Yes. So that's a really big statement for somebody that's worked on Elder Scrolls and all of these other kind of like huge, you know, projects. And arguably 20 Strong is about to have its biggest moment. You know, so what does it mean to finally have 20 Strong really be heavily into the spotlight with kind of the backing of Awakened Realms, bringing totally new people to the 20 Strong system?
I mean, I want to hear what Salem has to say about this too. But
I want to hear from both of you on this, because this is the big kind of finale here.
because Salem and I would say are probably the two biggest 20 strong fans in the company. Would that be accurate to say, Salem? Like,
I'd
we
say
both
so,
love
yeah.
20 strong. We love making 20 strong decks, and we love playing it, and so very pleased to be able to work on it. And it's so fun because like it's so fun because it is an easier process. It's like it doesn't feel like you're having to like eat a house like it does when you have to make new like Elder Scrolls or like Too Many Bones stuff, where you're just like there's so much stuff you have to consider and it takes such a long time. Like and you get to kind of like it's like you get to create like this almost like handmade like bespoke object you can kind of hold up and be like, look, it's all right here. Like that's very very satisfying, and for it to all like work in this sort of like small box is really really fun to me and satisfying. And I would say that like I I obviously want the company to do well, and I'm very pleased to have been able to work here for such a long time. And it's always nice to have more people recognizing your stuff. Like I would say that like making Elder Scrolls the first time was like a difficult process, just because like it was so much work to do it. Like it was we Sam and I just worked like all of us, but Sam and I worked together a lot on that project, and so it was a real tough go of it in terms of like just the amount of hours we had to put into it to get it to where it is. And it was nice that it was successful because I think that it did make us feel a little bit better about like all that time. We're like, oh man, like we really did make something that like is doing really for the company, people really like and stuff. As far as it goes, it's like I'm excited that it's going to do well, and it's great that it is, and I think that out of the decks that I've designed for it, like for the system, like Tainted Grail is my favorite of the ones that I've been like the lead on. Um, and I think Sam would probably say the same about their Etherfields deck. But like it, I the sales are not necessarily like it's like it's cool to get the attention, but it's like ultimately it's like if I liked what I did and some people liked it and it found its people, like I am happy. It's like Trover is doing like quite well for us, which I'm really pleased with. But even if it had been only okay, and there are people who are like, oh, this is really fun, it's like it was really fun to make that. And like I would say that the Too Many Bones prior to Tainted Grail, Too Many Bones deck was maybe one of my favorite things I had designed. And that is not like it was not a huge campaign, and that was probably not even the most popular deck out of those three decks. But I just liked the way that it worked, and I liked the way that I felt when I played it, and I liked seeing what people had to say about it. And so like ultimately, like the work to me is more satisfying than the attention, or the attention paid to it, in my opinion. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like the last thing you said there. Like, I mean, that's why too I absolutely adore everything Burn Cycle, even though that game has not found as wide of an audience. But again, the audience it has found loves it, and
Such a cool game, by the way. Such a
thank
cool
you.
game.
I love it, and I could talk about it for a long time, but I'm going to try and stay on track here. But it still speaks to that thing of the work that was put into it and the pride with what we made is the most fulfilling part, especially when the people that it finds love it the way they do, even if it may not be like a crazy amount of people. Like I would always be more proud of a 10 out of 10 game that like 100, I'm just throwing out numbers there, but like 100 people like versus a 6 or 7 out of 10 game that, 1,000 people like. But obviously, we gotta, make sure we're making stuff that keeps the lights on. So when we do have an Elder Scrolls where we both feel so proud of what we put in there and also does very, very well, that's a double bonus. And that's what we're really
Yeah.
excited for with this like Awakened Realms stuff. Like, yes, we're excited that it's like, oh yeah, this will be a big campaign for us. That'll allow us to keep making awesome stuff. But also we are so proud of these decks. And I would say, yeah, Etherfields is the deck I'm most proud of. At least the deck I'm most proud of that exists and is printed at the moment.
Yeah, we have
which
a bunch of
kind of going
stuff
back.
in various
What?
stages of
Going back
development
to
and
the
planning.
idea, like when Ryan's saying, like, oh yeah, we're probably the two biggest 20 strong fans. I have found myself these last couple of months to be very fortunate to have a good amount of free time. Like we've been in absolute proofing and everything like that. But my role in proofing is not as big as like Ryan's, for example, as Ryan is doing all of like the editing passes and consolidating and getting that sent to graphics and working with Bethesda and all that. Whereas I'm just reading it and making some notes. So that doesn't take up my whole day. And we haven't quite yet gotten to the point with Too Many Bones where I can start running with that. And I've also gotten a good head start on more Elder Scrolls stuff. So like I've been in a unique position where I've like, whoa, I can just like make stuff. And I have made 3 relatively final, like I mean, still need to be playtested, but like 320 strong decks in that time, plus 3 more that are in early concept stages. And I know not all of them are going to see the light because like that, there's so many ideas for 20 strong and not enough places to slot them. But it's speaking to that, like just working on it is so fulfilling, even if it's like, oh yeah, this is not gonna get made. This is, and one of those decks, as I've sort of hinted at, is probably, I dare say, the most fun thing I have ever made. And it is
You're
an
killing
absolute
me.
energetic blast. I have to hype it up. It is
You're
so,
killing me.
and it's so
Okay, I stopped
simple.
recording. Why don't you tell me what it is?
We'll make that
Yeah.
one. We will make that one. But we
It
can't.
might just not exist as
Because we can't say too much about it because it's something we would maybe be exploring a deal with someone to theme it in a certain way. But
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
So it's possibly not an original IP, but you have a system
Correct.
that would work well with a specific IP.
Yeah, it would work. There's one in mind that we think it would work best with, but it is a system that doesn't need that IP to do well. It would just be like, oh yeah, that would just be the coolest way to do it. But it's also a really like
it's a cool deck.
I played it again, and oh my gosh, it's so energetic. It's like, oh my gosh, yes. So as just speaking to that, like fun, it's so fun to make stuff for 20 strong. And even if some of those other ones I have in my head or have even prototyped don't ever get made, it's like it's still so much fun to work on. Every time I make one, I learn more about how it can be applied in cool ways, how it can be simplified in important ways. It's great. I love 20 strong.
Well, I don't know how we don't end on that. I will say through this conversation, going into it, I recently watched kind of the Andrew's videos and got an understanding of the games and was excited about some aspects. I wonder, how much of this is just going to be kind of like, hey, we're going to make some money on a collaboration with Awakened Realms. But I can confidently say that all 3 games have these really unique aspects that are just so exciting and seem larger than the small package that they're going to come in. I am so excited to deck build and string together nodes to explore Etherfield, and to have a co-op game in a 20 strong package where I can stab my friends in the back. Like all of this stuff is so exciting, and it clearly is not a money grab. It's clearly a passion project where you all put a ton of time and thought into innovating the system, not adapting what was already there. And I think that's a huge accomplishment that I think, like I said, I haven't played them yet, but I don't know how they're bad, to be honest, and not incredible. So
Thank you.
Now it's come from a Chip Theory fanboy, so don't feel too good about yourself.
Our names have to go on all of this stuff, and so I think that like everybody who works in the company at all, but especially just speaking to the people who do the design side of it, like and development side of it, it's like I think we're just sort of like, well, if my name is going on it, it better be good,
Right.
like and so it's like I don't know that we could make something that is a cash grab because it's like, well, I have to, my name's on it, so like I want to be pleased with it because like that means something to me, like
Yeah.
And
But it would be so easy to
yeah.
do in a 20 strong deck. You already have part of the system built. You're throwing on some IPs that have high recognition. And that's clearly not what was done here.
Yeah.
So thank you. We've went incredibly long. You know, we had some technical difficulties. I'm so glad we pushed through those. I don't know how I get this out to more people than I will, but I need people to listen to this because there's so much good stuff. So I'm really excited to get this out, and I'm guessing I'll probably put out the first day of the campaign. I don't know how many.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Yeah,
absolutely. This has been a blast.
So with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now. So thanks for being here.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.
Talk to you later.
See ya.